students. As I mentioned to you yesterday, today we're going to be doing some activities. And before we do, I just want to introduce you to the application of the taxonomic classification system that we ended with yesterday. Remember, kings play cards on fat green stools. And raise your hand if you can remind us why we remembered this silly little phrase. Very good. Kings play cards on fat green stools. You look at the first letter of each word, and you've got kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Now, normally we'd be doing an activity, as you can see in your lab book. We will not be able to do that today. It's not necessarily a bad thing because it can be a pretty stinky lab, if you know what I mean. If you look over page 75 in your book there, page 75, it can be a pretty stinky page. But I would like to blow some dust off of my keyboard here. I would like you to take you through a visual breakdown of how the taxonomic classification system works. My mouth is tongue-tied today. My apologies to you, because you got to listen to me. I want you to think about, you know what, it's probably because I'm salivating, thinking about the example I'm going to use. How many of you like candy? I love candy. And there are different kinds of candies that I love. Imagine going around your neighborhood once again someday and collecting a whole bag full of candy. Now, when I was a kid, the first thing that we would do when we got home would be to empty the bag of candy on the kitchen table and separate it all. In fact, we would categorize them or group them according to our preferences. I grew up with 7 kids in my family, so we all had our own individual preferences of candy. Think about that original bag full of candy as a kingdom of candy. The Candy Kingdom. Sounds like it could be the name of a game, too. Anyway, the Candy Kingdom could include all of the different kinds of candy that you may have collected in a journey around the neighborhood. Now, think about it for a moment. How could you possibly divide that Candy Kingdom into different categories? Let's say you had to divide them into 2 separate categories. What might your categories be? Well, there is no right or wrong answer here. You might divide them into the sweet phylum and the sour phylum of candy, perhaps. And personally, I don't really care for the sour phylum. I'd be going for the sweet phylum because I have a major sweet tooth. I like sweet things rather than sour things. But I know some of you might really like sour things. That's okay. But notice what I'm doing here. Calling the first group, the largest group, the single group, the group called kingdom. Breaking that down into 2 smaller groups called the sweet phylum and the sour phylum. Now, how might you break that down further? Well, how might you break down the sweet phylum? How might you break down the sour phylum? One of the things you could do is divide it into texture, like the hard class and the chewy class. You know, the hard class of the sweet phylum of the Candy Kingdom, you might think of specific examples of candies that might fall within that class. In fact, can you think of any examples of hard, sweet candy? You might then break it down into a further category. Or how about the chewy sour candy? Can you think of any examples of chewy sour candy? Those are the kinds that I would stay away from. Not only does chewy candy stick in my teeth, but I don't like sour, as you know already. But here's an example of something that you could do with an object like candy. So, what I'd like you to do this afternoon for homework is this. I would like you to read your home activity. Your home activity in your book is found on page 74. And with your home activity, I would like you to use page 75, the visual breakdown, the diagram like I'm showing you here. I'd like you to use that diagram as the template or the model or the format for you to use in order to complete your home activity. And if you show it to me tomorrow, I may just give you a bonus point. So, and by the way, your parents might really be appreciative as well. So it might take some of you longer than others. You can be thinking about it between now and the time you get home. But again, on page 75, don't use everybody's dirty shoes. I want you to read over the home activity and use that as your template. Okay, so that is your lab activity for today. But before we call it quits, I want to bring your attention over to a close-up view of something that we can discuss in class here today. So I know we don't have dirty sneakers and shoes on the floor, but I do have a bunch of other items here. And I'd like to take a few moments to discuss the classification of these items, which are all a type of marine organisms. Take a moment to pause the video and discuss among yourselves how you might break these items into smaller groups. Now, it might be difficult for you to see on the camera unless you've zoomed in, but I might take these organisms here and break them down according to their morphology or their appearance. So I might take all of these shells and group these together, all of these spiral shells that look similar. Speaking of spiral shells, I see some other spiral shells here, but they look different than the larger spiral shells, so I might put them into a different group like this. And oh golly, wait, there are other spiral shells here too, but they look completely different as well, so I might put them into a completely different category. Oh, wait, looks like I missed a spiral shell here. I'll put him over by the others. Now I'll put these kind of flat shells in a category of their own because they all kind of look similar to one another. Oh, look at that. I missed one that I think probably will go over here nicely. Now, what about these other ones? Oh, if I turn these over, looks like they're all kind of growling faces. So I'll put the growling faces here in this group here. Oh, another growling face. Oh, another growling face, which leaves us with just one. So I'll put this one by itself over here. And what you might end up with is something that might look like this with these different categories. Maybe this is what you would have done. But in so doing, I'm using the scientific principle of observing different groups according to similar characteristics. This might be a way that a life scientist would group or categorize living things. This isn't right or wrong. You may have divided it differently. But the point is, you're using your powers of observation to look for similarities and differences between organisms, and that is the important thing, which is going to lead us to our fun activity right now. So let's head back to the big view here, and I'd like to share with you now in your book a couple of activities that I'm going to encourage you to play with right now. In order to complete this activity, you are going to need a partner, but you're going to stay in your seats where you are and just look across. I will pair you up with a partner here in class. And you don't even have to really be sitting directly next to one another in order to complete this activity. But I'd like you to open your books to page 77. Page 77. There are directions there on the bottom of page 77, which looks like this. And if you've ever played the game Guess Who, this is the Guess Who guessing game with animals instead of silly faces. So again, read the instructions on the bottom of the page and play a couple of rounds of the classroom activity Animal Guess Who game with your partner. And if you both have time to play one another with that game, look at the previous page. And the previous page, the Guess Who game there, is a Guess Who famous scientist game. So you have a couple of activities you can be playing with your partner for the remainder of the period. And don't forget, tomorrow there will be a quiz. So be sure to study on your own at home in preparation for tomorrow's quiz. And don't forget the home activity as well. Everybody at home will appreciate it. But for now, I'm going to give you the rest of the time to play the game. And so I will